For nearly 500 years, the Galactic Concord had existed as the greatest alliance of intelligent species in known space, a sprawling network of peace, shared science, and carefully controlled progress. But it had one blind spot: Earth, or as the Concord called it in Forgotten Records, World Thea. Officially, Earth was marked as an abandoned or failed origin world, one of many planets where intelligent life had flickered for a moment before vanishing without ever leaving its atmosphere. No one had visited it in centuries, and no one cared to, until a small Concord survey drone, passing through an edge system near the old Sol coordinates, caught an unusual signal drifting through interstellar space. The signal, crackling and faint, seemed to be wrapped in radiation damage, yet embedded within it was a rhythm, then language, and then something far stranger, a proof. Not just a scientific formula, but a breakthrough, something called the riser construct, written in an old Earth dialect and paired with what appeared to be a calm human voice, saying to all who listen beyond the stars, we were never lost. The drone transmitted the discovery back to Central Archives, where it was flagged and then rapidly escalated through Concord intelligence. At first, the Council dismissed it as a clever forgery or some echo from the past. After all, how could a supposedly dead world send a message that rewrote a fundamental law of physics? But archivist Kin Varix, one of the last true scholars of Concord history, couldn't ignore it. He'd spent his life studying lost civilizations, and Earth had always fascinated him, even in its silence. Something about the tone, the calm confidence in the voice, didn't sound like desperation or a call for help. It sounded like a challenge, or perhaps an invitation. Varix requested a deep archive search and, to his surprise, found that Earth's last known transmission was dated nearly 900 years ago, and since then, the planet had vanished from all navigation logs. Curiosity turned to obsession as he pieced together fragments of human history: wars, inventions, exploration, decline, but always followed by long gaps, as if someone had carefully edited the record. The Concord reluctantly approved an expedition, just a single diplomatic vessel to visit the Sol system and verify the source of the signal. Leading the mission was Envoy Terran, a seasoned negotiator with little patience for myths, and alongside him, Varix, driven by questions no one else wanted to ask. As their ship, the Unity's Reach, approached Sol, the crew expected to find ruins, or perhaps an uninhabitable planet, another relic in the dark. But what they found was different. The system wasn't empty. It was quiet, yes, but unnaturally so. Mars shimmered with faint atmospheric clouds, as if in the early stages of terraforming. The asteroid belt was clean, too clean, as if automated systems had long ago harvested it. And the moon, once cratered and dead, now bore strange smooth structures that glowed with soft, controlled energy. Still, Earth remained untouched at first glance, cloudy, blue, serene. But as they drew closer, the ship's systems began to respond on their own, navigation correcting itself, propulsion softening. Then a soft chime rang through the command deck, and a voice echoed across every language channel at once, translated seamlessly. "We've been expecting you." Terran froze. No transmissions had been sent. No signals had been broadcast. Yet someone or something on Earth had identified them and spoken first. The crew looked at each other, waiting for orders, but Terran was silent, unsure for the first time in years. Varix, on the other hand, felt a thrill run through him. Humanity, long forgotten, had just spoken across the stars with clarity and without fear. The ship was gently guided into orbit, not hijacked, not attacked, but welcomed, held in place by invisible gravity technology far beyond anything the Concord possessed. No weapons, no threats, just precision. Data flooded in. Earth's power signatures were massive but controlled. Its satellites were old in design but maintained. Its radio silence had not been accidental. It had been intentional. The deeper their scans went, the more questions arose. Why had humanity stayed quiet all these centuries? What else did they know? And above all, why now? Why break the silence now? As the ship stabilized, a narrow-band transmission was received, this time directed only to Archivist Varix. It was not a voice, but a file, coordinates to a location on Earth, along with a message in Old Earth Standard. "You sought us." Now, let us tell you what you missed. The crew debated the next move. Terran argued for caution, but Varix knew the moment had arrived, the point where history either turned a page or let it burn. For centuries, the galaxy had believed humanity was gone, failed, or irrelevant. But now, with a single message, a single voice from the past, Earth had spoken again, and in doing so, made it clear they were never lost, never forgotten, and perhaps never truly gone. Whatever awaited them on the surface, one thing was certain: the history of the Concord was about to change forever, and Varix intended to be there to witness the moment everything changed. The Unity's reach hovered silently in Earth's orbit, held steady by invisible forces that made no sound, no flash, no sign of pressure, just precise balance, as if Earth's unseen hand had reached out to cradle the ship like a welcome guest rather than a trespasser. Inside the vessel, tension grew with every second. Though no threats had been made, the complete control Earth had over their movement unnerved the crew. Envoy Terran paced near the central view screen, eyes locked on the calm blue planet below, his sharp mind working through every protocol, every risk. He had faced warlords, unstable colonies, and broken treaties before, but never silence paired with such confident technology. Beside him, Archivist Varix sat hunched over his console, staring at the file Earth had sent, the coordinates and the message that felt more like a riddle than an invitation. It wasn't a location near a city, nor a site near what had once been Earth's great power centers. It was a remote coastal region once known as New Zealand, a place known for its natural beauty rather than political power. No military buildup, no visible defense grid, just an untouched piece of Earth's land, as if nothing had changed in 1,000 years, and yet everything clearly had. The crew exchanged nervous glances as a soft signal activated the docking systems, aligning a shuttle bay without asking permission. Earth wasn't just calling them down, it was choosing how they would arrive. Against his own cautious instinct, Terran approved the landing party himself, Varix, and 2 aides. As their shuttle descended through the upper atmosphere, the silence became even more strange. There were no signs of modern cities, no massive towers, no industrial clouds, no orbital traffic, just oceans, forests, and land patterns unchanged for centuries. It was not the silence of ruin, but of restraint. It felt like the entire planet was holding its breath. As they passed through the clouds, a structure came into view near the coordinates, sleek, silver, half-grown from the Earth itself, resembling no Concorde architecture. There were no visible doors, yet their shuttle slowed and landed gently on a clear platform nearby, as if guided by a whisper. The hatch opened, and the air was perfect, fresh, clean, balanced. Not artificially filtered, but naturally maintained. They stepped out, scanning everything, but no weapons, no surveillance, no resistance came. Then the building opened, not with noise or light, but with seamless silence. A figure stood in the entrance, human in appearance but clearly different, more precise in movement, more serene in presence. She wore no uniform, just a dark blue robe-like suit, and her eyes held an unsettling calm, like someone who knew more than she would ever say. "Welcome to Sol," she said in perfect Concorde standard, her voice rich with clarity. "I am Ellen Rise. I speak on behalf of Earth." Terran stiffened, prepared for negotiation or deception, but Rise simply gestured for them to follow. Varix, however, was already stepping forward, eyes wide with wonder. Inside, the structure revealed a quiet hall filled with art, maps, books, and strange holograms showing timelines, mathematical graphs, and symbols no Concorde language had recorded. It was not a control center or throne room. It was a museum, or perhaps a memory. Rise led them without explanation, letting them observe, letting the silence speak. "Why now?" Terran finally asked, breaking the tension. "Why contact the Concorde after centuries of silence?" Rise paused at a display showing the spiral arms of the galaxy, marked with known civilizations and several blank spots. "Because you were finally ready to listen," she replied. "Not with weapons. Not with pride. With questions." Her words struck deeper than expected. She explained that Earth had not vanished, it had simply stepped away. Long ago, humanity saw the pattern, Each civilization that joined the Concord advanced, then plateaued. Technology slowed. Innovation became committee-based. Exploration turned to politics. War was avoided, yes, but at the cost of ambition. Humanity, faced with that future, chose another path. It withdrew silently, let its signals fade, erased itself from maps, and focused inward. Over centuries, Earth solved problems in silence, not through conquest or commerce, but by rethinking existence. They had found energy without waste, communication without noise, society without hierarchy. But it came at a price being forgotten. Now, they had returned not to reclaim power, but to ask if the Concord was ready to change with them. Terran was silent, unsure whether he felt challenged, insulted, or enlightened. Varix, however, felt as if history itself had turned inside out. Everything he'd learned, every ancient theory about the fall of Earth was wrong. Earth hadn't fallen. It had evolved. Rise led them to a room with only one object, a console projecting a single phrase across languages, "The future is shared." With a calm voice, she offered Earth's archives to the Concord on one condition. No replication, no weaponization. Only understanding, she said. If you cannot accept that, the door will close again. Terran wanted time, wanted discussion, but the moment pressed on him like a weight. Earth had waited long enough. Varix turned to him, eyes wide with silent urgency, as if begging him to see what he saw, a future bigger than any alliance or empire. And beneath that tension, one unspoken truth remained. If Earth had been quiet this long, with this much knowledge, what else were they capable of? What had they already seen? What had they already prepared for? As they left the structure and returned to orbit, Rise's final words echoed through Varix's thoughts. You thought you found us? But, perhaps, it was we who found you. The shuttle docked in silence, the crew too shaken to speak. Suspicion and awe battled in their minds, but one thing was clear. Earth was no lost world. It was a mystery that had just begun to open, and what lay beyond would rewrite more than just history. It would change the very purpose of the Concord itself. Back aboard the Unity's Reach, silence wrapped the crew like a heavy cloak, not out of fear, but from the weight of everything they had seen and heard, because what they found on Earth had not been a lost people, but something far more complicated, a civilization that had stepped away from the galaxy, not out of failure, but choice. Envoy Terran sat alone in the observation deck, watching Earth slowly rotate beneath them, a planet that looked so ordinary from above blue oceans. Green land, calm clouds, yet beneath that surface lay knowledge that could shake the foundation of the Concord itself. He had always believed in structure, order, alliances carefully built over centuries, but now all of it seemed fragile. Earth had revealed just enough to unsettle them, and Ellen Rice had spoken with the kind of quiet authority that left no room for doubt. She hadn't begged or demanded, she simply offered and warned. Across the ship, Archivist Varix worked tirelessly, reviewing every bit of data Rice had allowed them to bring back, focusing especially on the phrase, "The future is shared." The files were encrypted, not to keep secrets, but to require thought, as if Earth wanted the Concord to understand rather than consume. One archive stood out, a timeline filled with gaps, and when those gaps were examined closely, they weren't signs of missing information, but signs of deliberate omission. Earth had erased itself from history carefully, and now, piece by piece, it was offering that history back not all at once, but in steps. As Varix unlocked the second layer of the timeline, something extraordinary emerged, proof that Earth had not only advanced in silence, but had been quietly observing the galaxy all along. Distant signals, artificial anomalies, even strange natural phenomena that Concord scientists had once brushed aside, Earth had been behind many of them, not interfering, but watching. They hadn't hidden in fear, but in patience, tracking the rise and fall of empires, including the Concord itself. More shocking still, Varix found hints that some Concord discoveries, energy stabilization techniques, quantum resonance tech had been subtly seeded by unknown sources over centuries. Could it have been Earth, planting ideas when the galaxy was ready, staying just out of sight? The idea felt wild, but the evidence kept piling up. Humanity had transformed not just technologically, but philosophically. They had rewritten their own understanding of life, merging technology and biology, not through implants or machines, but through harmonics living systems designed to resonate with thought and emotion. Rise herself wasn't enhanced in the way Concord citizens used technology. She was tuned, a product of generations of refinement where consciousness and physics had become partners. Earth didn't just know more, they had become something more. Varix couldn't hold back his excitement and fear. If humanity was capable of such quiet power, what else were they capable of? And why reveal themselves now? Rise's message echoed in his thoughts. You were ready to listen. But what if this was also a test? A trial to see whether the Concord could grow, or if it would cling to old ways. Meanwhile, Terran wrestled with a deeper worry. What would happen if the rest of the Concord learned the full truth? Power struggles, political shifts, technological races all could erupt if Earth's knowledge were released without care. He requested a private transmission to Rise, asking for a direct conversation, and to his surprise, she responded instantly, her voice filling his chamber. She answered no questions directly, instead asking one of her own, if knowledge is given without understanding, does it lift or destroy? Terran had no reply. Rise offered him a chance to come to the surface alone, to see what Earth had become beyond the polished meeting hall. The next day, Terran stepped once more onto Earth, this time in a valley so green and alive it seemed untouched by time. There were no vehicles, no screens, only humans moving with quiet focus, their daily lives blending work, thought, and nature. No cities, no pollution, no signs of artificial control. And yet, everything was efficient. Crops responded to human presence, tools responded to thought, and every structure was grown rather than built. It was not a society ruled by machines, but one in which life and technology had been fused through resonance. Rise showed him schools where children learned not through force-fed facts, but through emotional connection and quantum-based thought training. She took him to a tower grown from crystal that sang quietly when touched, storing knowledge in tones rather than text. She showed him a room of memory where Earth kept the stories of other civilizations it had watched die, recorded not to gloat, but to mourn. You think we hid out of pride? She said softly. We hid out of grief. The galaxy wasn't ready to hear what we saw, what we knew would happen. Earth had watched the Concord grow, but also stagnate, locking knowledge behind bureaucracy, slowing invention with caution, trading curiosity for comfort. You called it peace, Rise said, but it was sleep. Now, humanity was offering an awakening, but not everyone would welcome it. Back on the ship, news had already begun to leak. Members of the crew had started whispering, some excited, others afraid. What would the council say when they returned? Would Earth be welcomed or feared? Varix realized that history was changing, not with a war, but with a whisper, and not everyone would hear it the same way. He drafted a report, careful and balanced, but he knew that once the truth left Earth's orbit, it could not be contained. As the Unity's reach prepared to leave, Rise gave them one last gift, a small device, no bigger than a seed, pulsing gently with inner light. When the time comes, she said, this will open the next door, but only if your hearts remain open too. Then she smiled, not with superiority, but with quiet hope, and stepped back as the shuttle lifted away. As the planet fell behind them, and the stars grew wide once more, both Terran and Varix knew nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity had not been forgotten, they had chosen to become a legend, and now they were ready to return as teachers. If the galaxy had the courage to learn, as the Unity's reach entered Concord space, the calm they had felt on Earth began to vanish, replaced by the sharp tension of a galaxy that had not been part of that silence, one that still ran on politics, power, and control. Envoy Terran knew the moment the transmission was sent ahead, the Council would not sit quietly. He was right. Within hours of arrival, they were ordered to report directly to the Central Assembly on Ventur Prime, the Concord's capital, where the grand chambers of glass and steel stood as symbols of unity, but today they felt like walls closing in. Terran and Archivist Varix stood in front of 12 counselors from 12 different species, all staring with varying degrees of disbelief, curiosity, and fear. The words came quickly: questions, accusations, theories, but none of them were ready for the answer that Earth, long thought lost or broken, had stepped away on purpose, had evolved in isolation, and now held knowledge that could quietly change the balance of civilization. Some counselors demanded proof, others called it a hoax, and a few, like Counselor Nivorn of the Thalos, sat quietly, reading the emotion behind the truth. Terran delivered his report with caution, leaving out the full scale of Earth's advancements, while Varric spoke carefully of the archives and the legacy buried within the encrypted files. But both men knew what the Council was truly asking themselves: if Earth had this power, who would control it? And more importantly, would Earth allow itself to be controlled at all? The assembly recessed, and behind closed doors, debates turned into arguments. Some believed Earth should be welcomed back immediately, invited to join the high-knowledge circle, while others warned that such a move would give them influence far beyond any other world. In the quiet corners of power, a few even spoke of force, of claiming Earth's wisdom by any means necessary. Terran returned to his quarters with a heavy mind. The Concord, which had kept peace for generations, now stood on the edge of a divide not caused by war, but by the sudden arrival of a truth too big to process. Later that night, a message arrived not from the Council, but from a secret contact, Counselor Nivorn himself, requesting a private meeting. In a dark chamber far from public eyes, the Thalos leader revealed what many feared to say aloud: that Earth's return would not just shift power, it would expose how stagnant the Concord had become. Nivorn believed the only way forward was change, not slow, safe change, but a rethinking of everything. He proposed a daring plan, a covert Concord mission to Earth, a second contact with broader access, not to take, but to learn to listen with humility. He asked Terran to lead it, not as an envoy, but as a bridge. Terran, torn between loyalty and instinct, hesitated. Back on the Unity's reach, Varric was already studying the seed-like device Rise had given them. After days of effort, it activated, revealing not weapons or machines, but a map, one that stretched beyond Concord space, marking ancient ruins, forgotten signals, and timelines that did not match official history. Earth had been watching longer than they admitted, and there was more places in the galaxy touched by Earth long ago, before it went silent, places now showing signs of awakening. It became clear Earth hadn't just prepared itself, it had quietly prepared the galaxy. The hidden legacy wasn't all on Earth, it was scattered, planted like seeds in systems the Concord had overlooked. Terran realized the truth was too big for the Council to handle as one voice. It needed champions within the system, people willing to guide change from inside. He agreed to Nivorn's plan, but with one condition: that the Concord's people, not just its leaders, must be allowed to choose how to respond to Earth's message. The next mission launched in secret. A mixed team from multiple species, guided by Terran and Varric, returned to Earth under a veil of silence. This time, they were not welcomed by a single figure, but led into the deeper heart of humanity's rebuilt world. They visited centers of learning, where minds were trained not just in knowledge, but in balance. They stood inside harmonized fields, where gravity bent to thought, where energy shaped itself to need. And slowly, the truth became impossible to deny: Earth had not advanced through dominance, but through understanding. They had learned to listen to the universe, not conquer it. They had seen the traps of power and chosen patience instead. In a hidden vault of memory, Rise revealed the final layer, a truth never meant to intimidate, only to reveal the stakes. Humanity had glimpsed what lay at the galaxy's edge, something vast, ancient, and asleep. A force that watched civilizations rise and fall, feeding not on war, but on imbalance. Earth had seen the signs in the past, and their silence had been both preparation and shield. Now that they had returned, that force might stir again. Rise spoke plainly: we are not the threat, but we are the warning. Unity must evolve, or the galaxy will face something it cannot survive with old thinking. With heavy hearts, the Concord team returned once more, this time not to present a discovery, but to spark a conversation. Terran stood before the Council, not as an envoy, but as a witness, urging them not to react with fear, but to rise with purpose. He called for reform not in structure, but in spirit. To welcome Earth, not as a superpower, but as a Teacher, to rebuild not through control, but connection. Some counselors remained resistant, unable to imagine a world where power was not the goal. But others, inspired by the proof, by the awakening that had started even within themselves, began to shift. It was not a revolution, not yet. But it was a recalibration. Quiet meetings turned into open forums. Citizens across worlds began asking questions, demanding truth, seeking the knowledge Earth had hinted at. Terra knew change would be slow, but it had begun. Earth had returned, not with ships or armies, but with a challenge, and the Concord, for the first time in centuries, felt alive again. The old maps no longer told the whole story, and the path forward was uncertain. But somewhere deep in the silence between stars, something ancient stirred, and Earth had already chosen its side. Now, it was time for the galaxy to choose 2.as. The sons of Venter Prime rose slowly over the council spire, casting long shadows across the polished crystal floors. There was an unusual stillness in the air, a moment suspended between the past and the future. The Concord, a galactic alliance that had ruled by consensus and caution for centuries, now stood at the edge of something it could no longer ignore. The return of Earth, quiet and powerful, had shaken the balance, not through violence, but with knowledge and presence that made old structures feel suddenly too small. After weeks of urgent meetings, private messages, and careful leaks to the public, it was clear the people of the Concord were no longer waiting for their leaders to decide. Curiosity had turned into movement. On colony worlds and home planets, citizens gathered to watch decoded transmissions from Earth, to hear recordings of Ellen Rice's words, and to study fragments of the strange, living technologies humanity had offered. Even in the most distant sectors, where Concord presence was often seen more as a name than a force, the signal had reached. The stars were whispering again, and this time, everyone was listening. Envoy Terran stood at the center of it all. A man who had once believed in slow diplomacy, now carried forward by something deeper, a sense that history was being rewritten not by war or conquests, but by understanding. Earth had not offered blueprints for weapons or ships, but guidance to think differently, to feel the systems around them, to see harmony not as weakness, but as strength. Archivist Varix, once consumed by records and facts, had become a voice for the future, speaking at forums, sharing the hidden patterns in humanity's timeline that revealed they had been preparing the galaxy for this moment for a long time. It was not only Earth's story that was changing, but everyone's. The Concord Assembly finally agreed to a new initiative, one that would redefine their mission not just to govern, but to learn, to explore in a new way, one not led by charts and power, but by resonance, balance, and shared growth. The recalibration protocol was passed quietly, but its meaning rippled outwards like waves in still water. A new kind of ship was designed, not for control but for connection. It would not carry soldiers, but scholars, artists, diplomats, and children. The first mission, called Horizon 1, would not go to Earth but launch from Earth, with humans on board as equals, guiding the Concord to places once forgotten or never seen, to awaken the ancient pathways and signals Earth had hinted at. And somewhere beyond known space, a forgotten beacon lit up again, a relic from the time before the Concord, pulsing with the same soft rhythm as the seed Earth had given them. Terran was chosen to lead Horizon 1, and though he felt the weight of it, he also felt something new: hope, not only for peace, but for purpose. Rise met him one last time before departure, not in a grand hall, but beside a growing river near one of Earth's harmonic fields. She spoke little, but her eyes held the knowledge of generations. She told him this was only the first page of a new story, one that would not be about humans returning to take control, but to walk beside those willing to evolve. "We do not lead," she said, "we remind." On the day of the launch, millions watched from thousands of worlds. There were still voices of doubt, of fear, but they were no longer loud enough to stop the momentum. The Concord had not changed entirely, but it had changed enough to begin. As Horizon 1 lifted into the stars, powered by harmonics tuned by both Earth and Concord minds, it passed the edge of map space and entered the space between certainty and legend. Inside, the crew didn't feel like explorers of territory. They felt like students of time, of meaning, of themselves. On board, children sang in frequencies that shaped light. Diplomats meditated with alien monks from the moon of Thraxis. Scientists studied how emotion changed matter when directed through harmonized fields. They didn't search for planets to own, they looked for connections to repair, stories to rediscover. And far beyond them, something stirred. Not in anger, but in recognition. A presence older than stars, once silent, now listening again. Earth had not returned just because it was ready. It had returned because something else was waking, and it wanted the galaxy to be ready too. The ancient force Rice had warned of was not evil, but indifferent, and indifference was more dangerous than any fleet. It responded only to harmony or chaos. Civilizations who chose power alone would be consumed, not out of cruelty, but because they echoed imbalance. But those who resonated with life, with unity, might be spared or even heard. That was the deeper legacy Earth had kept hidden until now. And so, as Horizon 1 crossed into that great unknown, Terran looked back one last time, not at Earth, but at the Concorde, and he understood this was no longer about returning home or expanding reach. This was about becoming something new. A story not just about humans or aliens or alliances, but about all life learning to exist with purpose, with understanding, with humility. A galactic story was beginning, and this time, everyone had a part to play. The stars, which had once seemed cold and silent, now whispered with meaning. And those who listened, truly listened, would shape the future not with force, but with resonance. A single message had rewritten history, but what came next would be written together,